Fox News alert, it's decision day. In America, control of Congress is up for grabs as millions of Americans cast their ballots in what's shaping up to be historic midterm elections. The first polls are closing in less than 2 hours from now. We'll also tell you about the key toss-up races to keep an eye on tonight. Plus, we are debuting our brand new Fox News voter analysis results. We have a lot of ground to cover this hour. Jesse's getting rained on, so let's bring in Brett Baer and Martha McCallum, who are co-anchoring tonight's special election coverage. You're there in the studio at the election headquarters. How's it going tonight, Martha?
So far, so good, Dana. We're waiting for that data to come in, and it's going to be a whole new ball game with this information that we have. 125,000 people polled. Exit polls used to be about 25,000.
And so it's over 5 days. And you look at the early voting totals, more than 38 million Americans have either early voted or absentee ballots. And you're looking at probably historic early voting, and we might be looking at historic midterm voting before we get to the end of the night.
All right, well, we're going to take it around the table, if that's okay with you, and everyone's going to get a chance to ask you a question. I'll start with Jesse.
Okay, so because we know nothing at this point, all we can do is really speculate, but I'm wondering if I could grasp at some straws here. If you look on Twitter, you hear things like, oh, in this heavily Republican district in Indiana, the lines are wrapped a mile around. Or, you know, I showed up to vote in a traditionally Democratic-leaning district in North Carolina, and there was no one there. Can you take these anecdotes to the bank ever in your experience, or are these just kind of one-offs that don't really set a trend?
You know, ever since 2010, those are usually individual stories about districts. I think broadly we can look at numbers on early vote and actually have the numbers. But as far as the anecdotal, who's showing up, you know, you get stories all over the place. I think you're going to see in a place like Missouri that doesn't have early voting, a lot of turnout, long lines, and I bet you're going to have some people voting late into the night and polls staying open to try to get those people in.
Yeah, I mean, what we're definitely all picking up on is just the general enthusiasm and the interest in this election, the likes of which I think the only time we saw it was in the presidential election back in 2016. So there's clearly enthusiasm. I mean, we just sort of, you see it and feel it in your conversations with everyone you have out there, that there's just an incredible amount of interest in politics in general, in the president, certainly, and in this election, absolutely.
All right, Laura Ingram, our guest here, for her first time on the Five.
I'm
We're
really
so glad
nervous.
to have you.
I'm very nervous about
Are you nervous?
I don't know. I'm not a guest very often.
Well,
so
now you get to ask any question you'd like.
I'm getting rained on. Juan, I'm going to give you all my rain. Is it still the case, Brett and Martha, that whatever happens tonight, America is a divided nation? We're divided along cultural lines. We're divided around political lines. Obviously, we're a nation that's more diverse than ever when it comes to ethnicity and background. But will this nation in any way be less divided after this midterm election? Great question.
That is a great question. I don't think whatever the result is tonight that it's going to lead to less division. In fact, if anything, it may turn the other way. If Democrats win the House, and it's an if, I mean, it's not a when, it's an if they pull off 23 net gain seats, they're going to have to make a decision whether they are investigating the president and his administration at every turn or trying to negotiate for big things they want, infrastructure, other big ticket items.
Yeah, I think also this is the first moment when those who are resisting the president have a chance to actually vote on that. And that may be some sort of cathartic experience for some people who are in that camp. But then they're going to get a chance to see how they like it, how it feels if they have a Democratic House. Is it going to create, a logjam? And that will play out in and of itself. But I think at least now people who feel like they want to register their dissatisfaction with the president are going to get a chance to do it for real in the voting booth.
The short answer, no.
All right, John Williams, hit us with your best question.
Well, so to me, it looks like Trump's name might as well be on the ballot. And especially, I think it's the case with Gallup showing right now 60% of Americans say they want to send a message about President Trump. And right now, when you look at his numbers, it's about 41, 42% approval. And for a president at that standing, historically, you're going to lose seats about 30 plus. Do you have any sense right now what the margin might be in the House?
No. Oh, we don't. I mean, we're going to look at this data probably in about 10 minutes.
Yep.
By the way, you're going to see it on the bottom of your screen. It's going to start scrolling different states and different facts and figures coming from this voter analysis that we've been doing. But we don't, Juan. And you're right. Traditionally, historically, the party in power loses anywhere from 25 to 33 seats in a midterm election. This could be different. It could be obviously more than that in a blue wave. And there are, the caveat is it could fall short of the 23. One thing is clear. There is a weakness in the Rust Belt, and that for the GOP, and that may be tied to some of the tariff situation and some of the backlash for that particular policy.
Yeah.
Great point.
Iowa is definitely a place to watch where the tariffs may come into play, and there's a couple of big elections there tonight.
All right, I saved the best question for you all for last. This is Greg Gutfeld, everyone. Greg Gutfeld.
Hi, y'all. It's more of an analysis than a question, but I'll try to frame it as a question. So Obama, during one of his midterms, lost like 60-plus seats, right?
First one.
So the
63.
Democrats, if they win 30, is actually kind of a win for Republicans. And it's only a temporary reprieve because in 2 years, those seats are going to be up when President Trump is running, which is going to get the whole base out there. So it's very possible that those 30 seats are like a rest stop on the freeway to Trumpville. It's like a temporary oasis. There's no getting around it. It's not actually a win, especially when you spent 2 years doing nothing but planning for this day. If you just only get 30 seats, that's like getting dumped after losing 30 pounds.
I think that's for Martha.
This is like I think this is the argument that you're going to hear from the White House for sure, is that it wasn't as bad as it could have been,
Like
and
that?
that's a victory. Exactly like that, I'm sure. Right from
Yes.
Greg.
Thank you.
All right, Brett and Martha, thank you for being with us and for being
guys.
there and for anchoring our coverage tonight. We'll see you all night long. Thank you very much. We will see you in a bit.
All right.
You guys.
But we are not leaving yet. We are going to have lots more analysis here. Laura, any other thoughts as we head into this election night?
Depending on what happens in the House, if it's close, and I think it probably will be closer than people think, these Republicans, this raft of Republicans who announced their retirement, like Jeb Hensarling, remember he's head of the House Financial Services Committee, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen from Florida, they might look back and think maybe that decision to retire was a little bit premature, because if it's close, they probably would have won by a larger margin or would have made it even closer. So I think people might have prematurely announced their retirement.
They might have, although for people who love term limits, people deciding to retire might not be such a bad
The
thing.
majority's better than that, though.
Juan Williams.
But I think the reason, Laura, that they decided to retire wasn't that they thought they would necessarily lose, but they weren't Trump Republicans. And so
Pick up their marbles and go home? I mean,
yeah, I think that a lot of people just said,
mature.
I'm not comfortable. I'm not going to defend the guy. I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon, which is what most Republicans have done. I just wanted to go back to numbers that we know at this point about early people, because 35 million, this is incredible, 35 million people have either voted early or cast absentee ballots. In 2014, the last midterm that we had, it was only 14 million. So it's more than double the number. And again, an indication of how energized the American people are for these midterms.
And as Jesse pointed out to me in the commercial break, maybe you'll have a moment to talk about it. A lot of Republican candidates did very well in the last 48 hours leading into what are tight races. Everything's on a knife's edge, but Republicans doing better in some places.
Right, our crack research team here at The Five did a deep dive on some of the late polling, Dana. And if you look at Indiana and Arizona, Missouri and Florida and even Montana, you saw a real Republican surge within the last 2 days of polling. Now people that, for instance, Donnelly now was down in 2 races. Talking about in Florida, Rick Scott was up in 2 races, and McSally's looking very strong, surging late in Arizona, and Tester is now within the margin of error, Democrat in Montana. So it looks like the Republicans surged late, and Donald Trump's late campaign blitz into all of these key races may have paid off dividends.
And they got good economic numbers on Friday.
Exactly. You know, it's weird how much you have to ignore in order to vote Democrat. You have to ignore the job boom. You have to ignore the economy, wages. You have to ignore an improved, peaceful world in terms of foreign policy. You have to ignore the fact that an overwhelming number of people in America are happy happy. And this is why the resistance is so deceptive, because their leaders are wealthy enough that they can actually roll back things that are good for the rest of America because they hate somebody so much and they hate that you're happy. It's really kind of sad and disgusting that they're taking this so personally.
But we're not sad or disgusting here at
Well,
this table.
I am.
A little bit.